All right, hello. So this is a thrill for me to be here at my alma mater speaking to you, especially channeling the themes of evolution, revolution. College can be such a powerful time of change and growth, and certainly it was for me as well. But when I left Penn, I had absolutely no idea what I was changing into. I had yet to find filmmaking, which would become my calling. I direct as a team with my brother Joe. And while we grew up film fanatics, filmmaking never seemed within the realm of possibility to us. It seemed a million miles away from our experience. So it's something that never seemed like an option. So when I left Penn and went back home to Cleveland, where I grew up, I didn't know what to do. I worked construction for a year. I randomly began law school. But there was something happening in cinema. It was a real revolution. In the 1990s, there was a phenomenon of independent filmmaking sort of growing in the United States. The 1980s had been characterized by big Hollywood polished movies that were traveling globally, kind of dominating the box office worldwide. And the 1990s became a bit of an answer to that, where people started making movies outside of Los Angeles and New York. These were people with very little money and not a lot of experience, but they were able to create movies that were starting to reach audiences and speak powerfully to audiences. So this was very inspiring to my brother and I. And particularly one movie in this movement was called El Mariachi. It was made by a filmmaker named Robert Rodriguez. And he wrote a book about how he made this movie, and he said that he described how he made it for $7,000. This was a light bulb moment for my brother and I. You know, movies up until that moment for us, and we understood them as something that required millions of dollars to make. Very difficult. The idea that you could create a movie like El Mariachi, which was beautiful and elegant and poetic and dynamic and thrilling for $7,000 blew us away. So we decided, okay, we've got to get serious about this now. We started reading every book we could on screenwriting or cinematography or lighting. We sought out anybody in Cleveland who had ever touched a movie camera before. We even made friends with the person who held the keys to the costume room at the Cleveland Playhouse. It was by any means necessary process. And over the years, it took us about 3 years to make a movie. And part of the reason it took such a long time is we kept running out of money and having to go back and work real jobs. But also we were learning the craft. We were doing it all ourselves. And filmmaking is a craft, and we learn crafts by doing them. So we did it slowly. We did it methodically. This became our film school. And when we finally finished our movie, we finally brought it to the festivals. And this was going to be our moment where we found distribution and reached audiences and found a way forward as filmmakers. So we went to the Slam Dance Film Festival, premiered the movie ends, and nothing. Silence, no reaction. Nobody approached us. Nobody wanted to get involved in sort of moving the movie forward. Nobody was interested in what we were doing next. And we left that festival with our heads hung low, panicking about what we were going to do next with ourselves. About a week later, we received a phone call from Steven Soderbergh. Now, Steven Soderbergh was a director we idolized. He actually kicked off the independent cinema movement in the 90s with a movie called Sex, Lies, and Videotape. So this was remarkable. He was the model we were chasing. He called us and he found something in our work that spoke to him. He found something in our craft that was interesting to him, in our voice. He felt like it was something that he wanted to help encourage and draw out and move forward. So he produced our next movie, which was called Welcome to Collinwood. Now, Welcome to Collinwood did just that. It was another indie movie. We made it in Cleveland, same as Pieces, but it did in fact reach a wider audience. So we were growing as filmmakers. Now, at the time, this independent cinema movement was not only exciting to us as filmmakers, but it was starting to actually influence Hollywood's major studios, television networks, etc., because of the popularity of these films. So Ron Howard reached out to us at this time. He had an idea about reinvigorating, reinventing the television comedy. And now nobody knows television comedy better than Ron Howard. As a young actor, he started some of the greatest TV comedies from Happy Days to The Andy Griffith Show. And then as an adult, he became one of our most accomplished film directors. So Ron's idea was that TV comedy had become stale. The idea of staging a comedy in front of a live audience on a limited set and telling stories there week after week was a format that had become too familiar, wasn't surprising or exciting audiences anymore. His idea was we needed to double down and figure out how to make half-hour television comedy like we were making cinema. Now, the problem is it's more expensive to shoot a half-hour comedy like it's a movie where multiple locations, a story that can go anywhere, etc., than it is to stage something in front of an audience. So the idea was you had to figure out a way to do this cheaply. So they turned to guerrilla filmmakers like my brother and I, not only because we had a sensibility that was subversive and challenging the status quo and potentially fresh and exciting to audiences, but also how we knew how to make movies cheaply. So we ended up making a show with them called Arrested Development. And it was just that. It was kind of this riotous, subversive approach to TV comedy, really bringing an indie filmmaking sensibility to network television. And it worked. We were able to move on and make several other television comedies in that same vein, Community, Happy Endings, etc. Eventually, we were contacted by Kevin Feige, who runs Marvel Studios. Now, there is a massive divide between the sort of subversive, outside-the-box indie work we were doing and what the Marvel movies were starting to become, which is sort of these global blockbusters made at incredibly high budget levels that involved incredibly sophisticated filmmaking techniques and visual effects, etc. But again, there was something in our work that was exciting Kevin. Some kind of sensibility, some kind of approach that he thought could actually end up benefiting what the Marvel Cinematic Universe was becoming. So we got hired after a long series of meetings where we continued to pitch our vision more and more clearly to direct this movie, Captain America: Winter Soldier. And that movie did very well. We were invited to continue telling stories with the MCU. And we made a series of films that culminated in a movie called Avengers: Endgame. That movie became the highest grossing movie ever at the box office. And at that point, Joe and I had kind of completed this storytelling arc that we were creating in the MCU. We felt like it was time for us to move on. Because of the success we had realized, we could basically move on doing anything we wanted. We could get any movie we wanted to make greenlit at any budget level we wanted to make it at. It was an incredible opportunity, a very rare opportunity. So what we decided to do was we decided to form our own independent studio. We knew we could attract enough funding to create a space where we could develop original material with artists we believed in, writers, conceptual artists, etc. We could take our time. We could spend a few years developing ideas into something that felt fully formed and presentable to the industry at large, and then bring them to potential distributors or additional financiers when the time was right. And this approach was especially important in this climate where the entertainment industry is changing fast. It's hurling between streaming and more traditional forms, theatrical, etc. Nobody knows where it's going. So sometimes when it takes a couple of years to develop a project, what the right choices are at one point in time may be very different at another point in time, later point in time. So it has ended up serving us well. And I want to turn now, our company is called Agbo, and I want to tell you a little bit about some things we're producing there. While my brothers and my directing agenda is extremely important part of what we're doing at Agbo, I think our producing efforts speak to the story that I'm telling in a very interesting way. These are some of the things we've made. You see here a movie called Mosul. So Mosul is about an Iraqi SWAT team in the city of Mosul who held out against the ISIS invasion and occupation of the city in a very remarkable way. This is a true story, incredibly emotionally affecting story. So we thought, this is a story that has to travel. We have to figure out how to get this story out of Iraq, bring it to the rest of the world. But it felt wrong to us to try to tell the story from an American point of view. We thought, how do we move the sensibility of what this story is as close as possible to an Iraqi point of view? So we made this crazy decision to not shoot the movie in English, but to shoot it in Arabic. There were going to be no Western movie stars in the film. And it's an entirely Middle Eastern cast, unknown Middle Eastern cast. But we supported the film with the budget of a much larger, proper Hollywood film. And we supported the film with the craftspeople who know how to deliver that kind of film, because we wanted to give the movie the advantage of reaching the widest possible audience. So I'm very proud that that was our very first movie that we made at Agbo. Similarly, on the series side, Larry Charles, who's a legendary comedic director, came to us and said, he had this idea for this show called The Dangerous World of Comedy. And he said, I want to make a show. I want to go around the world and find comedians who are doing their comedy in places where they can be imprisoned or killed for what they're doing. I feel like I just want to explore that because I feel so privileged here in the United States being able to say whatever the hell I want. So we said, yes, this is an incredibly important series. We greenlit it right away and made that show with Larry. Another interesting thing we produced is was by a filmmaking duo, a directing team like my brother and I, known as the Daniels. Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinhardt, they called themselves the Daniels. Now, they had made several music videos that we really loved. They made an indie film called, oh my God, Swiss Army Man. It was a really cool indie movie that that found an audience, but not a very wide audience. And so, in the same way that Steven Soderbergh approached us, we reached out to the Daniels and we basically said to them, hey, if there's a way we can help you maintain your sensibilities and your craft, yet reach a wider audience, we'd love to contribute to that process. So after a couple months, they came back and said, we have this idea, this weird idea called Everything Everywhere All at Once. They pitched it to us. It was brilliant. And we began a 2-year process where we developed a screenplay with them. And what we tried to bring to their process was a focus on the characters and the emotional journey of those characters through the story. Because the story was so surprising in terms of where it went and what it did. And that was a big part of the thrill of the film. But to be able to make that movie most accessible to audiences, to be able to follow the family story at the heart of it and clock in with the emotional journey of each character throughout the entire film and figure out how it all comes to the best catharsis at the end of the movie. That was something thought we could help them with. And the movie ended up reaching a wider audience than any of us ever dreamed possible. So that was a thrill. And also, again, these people that have been so pivotal in identifying what we can offer of value to the rest of the world and helping us along our way, we always looked at it as a bit of a karmic debt we owe to the universe to do the same for others. I want to tell you, the last thing I want to tell you about is a series that is about to premiere in 1 month. It's an Amazon series called Citadel. Now, this is a giant global spy show. It's set in the near future. It's about a fictional spy organization called Citadel. Now, this organization isn't loyal to any country. It sort of transcends borders. It has a mission and a set of goals and a set of values and an agenda that speaks to people regardless of politics or national origin. Now, this doesn't sound like an indie endeavor, but everything we do has to have some element of innovation to it, of surprise to it. It has to push ourselves into some form of storytelling that is new and fresh and evolving. So the idea behind Citadel is this. When we were working in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we were working with a specific set of characters, crafting a specific storyline around those characters, while other creators were working with other characters and crafting different storylines. Now, eventually, these storylines and characters would begin to bleed into each other, eventually all sort of climaxing into a big finale. But that was a grand experiment in storytelling that had never been done before. It was extremely exciting to us as artists to be able to work in a form like that, and it seemed like it was meaningful to audiences as well. But the thing about that process was it was entirely an American process. Even though these movies were traveling to every obscure corner of the globe, and it was allowing people from anywhere to experience these movies together, to dialogue about them together, and really connect with one another in a way that we had never seen before. It was still being crafted out of the traditional Hollywood machine. So what we thought a great innovation would be is, how do we make this collaborative form of storytelling international? How do we get a creative team here in the United States to work with a creative team in India and a creative team in Italy, which is exactly what we're doing with Citadel, and tell a story that's all within the same mythology, but all independent expressions of what can happen with that mythology, while at the same time affecting one another creatively. So with Citadel, we're making these 3 shows, are all at various stages of development and production. But every 2 weeks, we have a virtual writer's room where everybody gets together and talks about where they are in their process, what's happening, what ideas, new ideas they have, and everybody's feeding one another in terms of what the possibilities are. So you're going to have, and these are all in the local languages of the places they're sourcing from. So very proud of what we're attempting to do with Citadel. The U.S. show is the first to premiere in about a month. It stars Priyanka Chopra and Richard Madden, and I'd like to give you a peek at a trailer that just dropped for it. Okay, so that's Citadel. I find it remarkable that this event was conceived and executed by undergraduates. I'm sure many of you in the audience tonight are undergraduates, and it strikes me that when I was an undergraduate here, I couldn't have possibly connected the dots to where I am now. Almost unimaginable. And I know that some of you may have ideas that are not yet a part of what the world is. And some of those ideas may need to become part of what the world is. They should become a part of what the world is. And this is an intimidating process. Words like evolution and revolution are large, almost like impossibly large ideas. But I think if you stay faithful to what you're passionate about, you remain open to the resources and people and collaborators you may find along the way to help develop these ideas and realize these ideas, you'll eventually find a way to hopefully make them part of what the world is. I know you've already done a remarkable thing by getting yourself to where you are now. And I wish you all the luck moving forward and towards whatever your destiny is. So thank you for the time.